everybody. This is Life Possible with a Disability podcast, and I have my amazing friend Chris Johnson as my guest today. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, glad to be here. Excited to be here. Glad we can make it happen.
Yeah, me too. So I have known Chris, I don't even know now for how many years, like 15 or it's
Yeah, at least 15 years.
Yeah. So, because I'm a manual wheelchair user, and Chris is an ATP, my first interactions with Chris were as an ATP, somebody coming in and helping me with my chair and making adjustments to this wheelchair. And Chris is, as you will find out in a minute, really easy to like, really easy to become friends with. So, yeah. And so I would say we became friends pretty quickly. It was like much less of a business transaction and more of a friendship. So when I went to work at NRRTS, which is a Baton Rouge inpatient rehabilitation hospital, small, 27 beds. So I always got all the spinal cord injuries, or anybody who had paralysis or loss of movement of some sort. I ended up being their social worker often. And so I always called Chris, no matter what the company name was at the time. My favorite ATP. He is an assistive technology professional, and so that was 10 years of our lives. And then I was getting pretty burnt out on social work. And then I'm also on the board for the Brain and Spinal Cord Injury Association of Louisiana, which is BIALA for short. So I remember when Mike Callahan came into one of those BIALA conferences, and all you guys were there at the Numotion table, and Mike approached me about a sales position, and I was so excited that every time Chris walked in NRRTS for the next 6 months, I was like, "Take me home with you. I need to go." Anyway,
well, it's funny. It's funny. There's a little bit more background to that story. There's a little bit of stuff in between, because I don't know if you remember generating the interest, right? Like I would come back, and then you'd be like, "Hey, where were you last weekend?" I was at this conference.
Oh yeah.
Conference, like Numotion, like does this, and Numotion does that. Yeah, this is kind of.
I remember exactly what you said. You were talking about Mike Swinford, and you said, look, he gave a speech during this conference where he talked about like balancing work and your family. I remember the exact story, and then I've heard Mike tell it since then. And you were like, Karen, this is, speaks to my soul, basically, is what you said. And I was like, that's a company I want to work for.
Yeah, and then we just kind of started chipping away at it to even see it as a possibility. And then we saw the chance, like at the conference, and then Mike happened to come Mike Callahan happened to come to that conference. Like, hey, this remember Karen I'm telling you about? And then from there, y'all just took off, and here we are now.
Here we are. Podcast. I know, it's crazy. Yeah. All right, so tell us about your background, because it's pretty eclectic, and then about your current profession, kind of how you stumbled into it.
Very interesting. I guess my background heading at least into assistive technology. I worked in years ago, early 90s. I worked in a group home, and I worked there for years with clients with developmental disabilities. And I even thought at that point, man, maybe I'll go into like psychology, or I'll go into something of that fashion, right? Like this mental health kind of thing. And then a guy that I was working with, at the time, I got to try to put this together because I don't talk about it that much, but, so this guy that I was working with, we had become, good friends, and he was going to work, and what he said to me at the time was a DME company. Now, at that time, I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, what is DME? Durable medical equipment. So he says durable medical equipment. still don't know, but like it lasts. Like I don't
Right.
understand. Like I'm thinking trash bags. Like I
That's
don't
so
know.
true. I
So
never thought about that in literal
durable,
terms.
like yeah, like literally, like I just couldn't understand what that was. So he was like, no, I do medical equipment at people, house it, and so forth. So but let me back up. So when I left the group home, I went to work at an outpatient clinic, therapy clinic, through a connection with this same guy. And I was a rehab
How
technician
old
at
were
that
you
time. So I
then?
assisted. Oh man, I was my I always grade everything by like your kids' ages,
Kids,
right?
yeah,
Where you
me
can kind of
too.
tell. But my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's 22 now, she wasn't born yet because I remember at that rehab clinic I had a baby shower, so it had to be
Aww.
1998 that I started there, maybe because
Yeah,
I was there a
yeah.
couple of years, and then she was born in '99. So somewhere in
But
those late
and you were
'90s,
in your, were you 30 yet?
20s,
Yeah.
20s. So I had to be 22. I had to be 23 or 24,
Yeah. Yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
in
A
there. So
baby.
still like
A baby.
yes, still developing my view of the world for sure. So and possibilities, right? So I'm like, okay, so I go and work at this clinic and stay there for a few years. And then that led to, I would see these guys come in and set up equipment for people. It was cool. Um, can't even remember what the medical equipment company was at the time, but they would come in and they would work on people's wheelchairs, walkers, and all this stuff. That's cool. So I went to work for this DME company out of Hammond, Louisiana, and we were awful. Like our service, the whole premise was not good. Like it was awful. Um it was like if the order didn't come in before a certain time, you had to get it like next week.
Oh,
We were
bad.
terrible. We were terrible. Yeah, we were just terrible. But it gave me a base knowledge of just kind of like, okay, there's medical equipment, right? And there were some things that happened within that company where people were kind of plucking me out, like, hey, we want you to do this, do that. But then I kind of outgrew it. Like, right,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna start looking around and see what's out there since I got a grip on
Right. The
like this
industry.
medical equipment. Yeah. So at that point, um, I put in a application to come and work at a company at the time, Home Care Supply, which you would be very familiar with, right?
Yes. Lynn Serio,
Which I
was
still
he
get to
there at the
work with to
time?
this day. Yeah, so I still get to work to this day with Chuck Fonno, who was my mentor
Yeah,
up
Chuck
until
and
like
Lynn.
every day. He still mentors me.
That's awesome. I love
Yep,
him. He is a teacher.
yep, absolutely. And so I credit Chuck a lot because he saw something in me that maybe I knew was there, but
It's nice
and
to
I
have
don't really
someone
get
believe in you.
listen. So I get so here's the thing: the DME company I worked for, we didn't do any what you call rehab, right? We didn't do any custom wheelchairs, any of that. We just were basic like canes, crutches,
Right.
hospital.
Yeah. And probably like a
So I got
K1 type chair, like a very
at the
basic
most,
rental.
yeah, like discharge, right? So I get to home care supply and like so everything worked out with that, and I was Chuck brings me in and takes me on a tour of like the building. What? Because I've always been kind of a gadget guy, like right, like
Yeah.
electronics and that kind of thing. So I've always thought that was kind of cool anyway. So um, Chuck took me around and they had like all this equipment around. And back then we did everything. Back then we did everything from animal nutrition to advanced
Oh, wow.
power chip, everything. We did everything. If you remember, like being a case manager, like you
Right.
could call us and we
Yeah.
would do it
One
all,
stop
right? And
shop.
so yes, um, and Chuck took me around and. And when I saw that stuff, and he was just hiring me to be a driver.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that stuff, I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and then Chuck was, hey, slow down a little bit. You know, hey, we can,
Right.
we'll talk about that. And
So
I was
back
like,
then, was it even called ATP yet?
great question. No. So back then, um, from what I understand, picking up to that point, NARTS was the one that was kind of where you wanted to be certified.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the National Rehab Registry is where you wanted to be because you had to meet certain qualifications and all of that stuff to be registered by NARTS. And that was the thing to be back then. You were registered, then you were kind of like, okay, you guys qualified to do something, but it
Wasn't a professional
necessarily
certification.
mandatory.
Right.
It wasn't mandatory. Payers weren't requiring that. It was just kind of like a thing where therapists need and organizations need, but it wasn't where you
Are we
had
in
to
the early
do
2000s
that
now?
to be certain. We're in the early 2000s. I started working with Chuck 99 to like 99 at home care. But yeah, great point. The Resna was around because it's an organization, but it wasn't mandated that you become certified to do certain levels of wheelchairs. And that's where there was a point in the early mid 2000s where it turned into an actual profession. Like you actually had to go and get this certification through Resna, which is we're that organization is the Rehabilitation and Engineering Society of North America,
Okay.
right? So they're responsible for doing testing on equipment, and they lobby for.
So yeah, so like in comparison,
so you're more familiar with that.
Well, in comparison, like OTs and PTs and social workers, I mean, in addition to like an advanced degree, you like for social workers, becoming a licensed clinical social worker requires 2 years of experience under supervision, and then you take a test. So they were Resna was the first ones, probably in combination with NARTS, pushing to say this is a highly skilled professional, and we need an official certification, right? And I think that's why people don't know about it.
Absolutely. And I would say if you want to know more about the qualifications of it, visit resna.org. It's a great tool to go and kind of look at what the requirements are. I have a funny story about me becoming certified. Also, but don't let me jump around too much. Make sure you keep me locked in. So from there, I become like basically an apprentice to kind of skip and fast forward a little bit. I become an apprentice to Chuck Fondo. At that time, Renee Chasson, Renee since passed away.
Yeah.
Early 2000s. He was a great friend and mentor of mine, and Lynn Serial as well. So I ended up.
Lynn's the one that told me that that if I kept getting pregnant and having babies, that I was gonna have to get a wider wheelchair.
Kind of matter of fact,
choked me up. Yeah.
And you're still in there with that little tiny 14, so you wasn't right.
It's a 15, but who's counting?
Who's counting? All right, so kind of fast forward. At that time, I still was working as an apprentice, and so I got the opportunity to take on like what we consider like a branch ATP or what we call a sales position in our Northeast Mississippi location, which was in Tupelo, Mississippi. So that's in 2006. I moved, and I think you guys all remember that. Oh no, Christmas. Yeah. I didn't even realize like the impact. For me to kind of spread my own wings and kind of put my own footprint on things, I had to relocate because those jobs were filled. So I talked it over with my family. My 2 daughters were young at the time. We relocated to Northeast Mississippi. I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
No family up there. But at that time, we had gone as Praxair Healthcare at that time. Even went from Praxair to National Seating and Mobility from the Praxair because they bought the rehab division. It's a long.
Wait, so you worked for NSM for a bit?
I did.
I didn't know that.
I did. I did for that had to be about a year, I guess. Because they bought the rehab division from Praxair.
Got it.
That's
Yeah,
when
because
we got
Praxair,
out of like
you think of
one-stop shop.
oxygen. Yeah. When I think of Praxair, I think of oxygen and things.
Right, and we were doing all of that stuff then, and the rehab was kind of like a leg of it, right? But then once that branched out, it was like the greatest thing ever. And we're gonna work for a company that focuses on like what we do.
Yeah.
It's kind of great, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up staying in North Mississippi for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
And
then
so I really was really able to cut my chops up there, so to speak, because
you were on your own, huh?
I was on my own.
Yeah. Did you call Chuck a lot? Or were you already weaned by then?
Thinking about it now, I don't think so, but maybe I did, because we were still within the same company.
Yeah,
so
well, that's true.
I did. And then we would see each other at conferences, right?
Right. Yeah,
we have these education seminars, and we had these conferences. We still saw each other back then. But kind of going back. So if you want to know the qualifications for ATP, my certification story is back then we had to go to a site to take your test to be certified. Now you have to have a certain amount of tenure within the industry, and there's different formulas to it. Also, there's tenure, there's schooling, there's
a combination.
And if you meet these requirements, there's a combination of requirements that you can meet, and it's a 200 question test that's 4 hours. Now, I believe it's still the same format. Only thing is it's electronic now, so I think you know if you pass or fail. Immediately.
Yeah.
So, but back then we had to wait about 6 weeks to find out whether or not you passed or not. And the nuance to this story, Jeff Constantino and I got certified at the same time in the same place.
Yeah.
We went to.
Just to recap for my audience, Jeff was already on the podcast with Blair Casey from Team Gleason, and that was like, I don't know, 10 episodes ago. But these are my best ATP friends. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, we're all super. There's a lot of camaraderie there. So
yeah.
Jeff is my brother basically. So oddly enough, we ended up getting certified at the same site. We were in a casino in Mississippi at a conference center. Is where this whole site was.
Wow.
And we took the test, and the whole story back then was if you receive a big envelope from Resna, you pass. If you got a small envelope, you fail.
Oh, funny.
And the test consists of, obviously I got a big envelope.
Good.
And the test consists of everything from anatomy, disease processes and identification, funding.
Are all the questions
environmental control?
Situational, or is it a combination of like factual things? Because what I heard about the exam was they give you scenarios and say what would be the best choice. Is that true about the test?
That's absolutely true. And the whole thing was you had to think. It was always like the Resna answer. Sometimes there's some real time scenarios that you run into might not necessarily be the Resna answer, but it's the answer at that particular time, so it can get a little tricky.
Right.
Because you have to do, in other words, in the true provision of rehab technology, you're not always thinking about, this insurance isn't going to pay for this. Mm-hmm. They can't afford that. You have to go into it thinking like, okay, the client is the number one.
Yeah, let's offer them every option and worry about how you pay. Yeah.
Correct. So you have to approach it in that manner, right?
That's the Resna approach.
The funding session. That's the Resna approach. And that's the way you always want to approach it that way. Sometimes I have to play that card when people say, "Oh, that chair is too heavy for me."
Yeah.
Hey, but it fits that person. Like, so we have to try to bridge the gap between, caregiver,
right,
client.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that came up. I don't know if I was on a NARTS call or I do a lot of it, but insurances and Medicare and Medicaid have somewhat trained us not to ask. And that's not a good thing. When you quit asking, especially Medicare and Medicaid, they think, oh, nobody wants this anymore. So unless you go through the process, say like, this is what's best for the patient, I'm going to make you deny it. And then we're going to appeal. I think that Resna approach
Absolutely,
is a good
absolutely.
approach.
You have to approach it that way. Absolutely. So as we, kind of trying to fast forward here, but again, that test consists of environmental control. There's even questions on that hearing aid. I
Wow.
mean, it's all kinds of stuff on the resident exam. That
Is
you
it,
have to
and then once you
that you
keep
have to
your
prep for.
continuing ed, that's it, right? You test once and then you just do your
Straight.
continuing.
Correct. So you have to maintain your certification. You got to have 20 education hours every 2 years. So it's a 2-year certification, and you have to recertify.
So you got the big envelope while you were still in Mississippi.
That's correct. That's correct. So that was big at that time.
Yeah. How many people do you think, like back then, there was it was a brand new certification. So there probably weren't that many people actually certified in the beginning.
There weren't many. You could pull up, like, if you went to the registry and you pull up how many people were actually certified. Like, you might have like 3 people in a state.
People knew they could do the
then.
job and not take the test, but with the industry trending in that direction, I feel like that was kind of a risky move.
That's
right?
correct, because the Medicares of the world and the funding sources of the world started requiring that certification. So definitely.
So you're like a pioneer.
Because at the time it was like a guy. well, I guess I was in kind of that first run, but the crazy thing is that it used to just be like guys who could work on wheelchairs. And it was just kind of like, dang, we all started out like cleaning and service wheelchairs. Kind of how we all started out. Now we have apprenticeship program.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of
all
that
kind of stuff, which is fantastic.
The guy I started dating in June of last year he wasn't happy in his job, and I was like, and it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't very fulfilling. And I'm like, you should really see what you should really see what Numotion has going on, and because he lives in Memphis. So he applied for a service tech position, got it. Somebody quit already. Now he's a seating tech position opened up, but he wants to get his ATP, and he wants to become an ATP. So I'm already, he starts dating a girl in a wheelchair, and now his whole life is immersed in wheelchairs.
That's awesome, and that's kind of that's a great pathway. Service, assembly, those are great pathways to learning.
And like you said, if you have no background, if you have no formal, like maybe let's just say you didn't finish a college degree, you work a certain number of hours as a repair technician or a seating tech, and that counts towards your experience to be qualified to sit for the exam. Yeah.
Exactly.
So where did you go after Mississippi?
Great question again. Had my son in Mississippi.
Our little football star.
Right? So we had a son. Yeah, a little athlete there, little scholar.
I'll keep you guys posted when he hits the NFL or actually college ball. It's going to be amazing. I'm getting an invite to one of the games.
Absolutely. It was a discussion. We kind of, I was looking for some bigger opportunities. North Mississippi is not like a hub of opportunity, right? Like, so,
yeah.
And it was attractive to kind of move closer to home. But at the time, I had like a non-compete in place, so it's not like I could go anywhere I wanted to. Mm-hmm. So we found this nice little pocket that was outside of that circle, and we ended up in Pensacola. So I was in Pensacola, and I worked for a company called Rehab in Pensacola for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And there were some changes that happened within Medicare that kind of changed They're dynamic. They went on the market to be sold, all this other stuff. So I kind of saw that coming. I was like talking to my wife, man, she was like, I'm not relocating again unless we move back home. We could do that. Okay. So from there, I reached out to, I'm shortening this story for sure. But I reached out to James Harlan.
Yep.
Somebody put me in contact with James. We met, and here I am.
Yeah.
So
I know. I had to
once
meet
we met
James
and
too.
talked, and
James is
yeah,
like the gatekeeper. Because Callahan,
that's right.
yeah,
That's
Callahan
right.
was like, "Well, I'm going to introduce you to James," and then they flew me to Nashville, and I passed the John Pryles test, and then here we
Yeah,
are.
here we are. So yeah, so still have a lot. He taught me a lot. Also, another one of my mentors in this. Just I've had a lot of great leaders and great people.
Yeah.
Uh, People like you, clients that I've worked with, just everybody just kind of molded me as just kind of how I approach this every day.
So cool. Yeah. It's amazing to me that I didn't see this as like a pathway and I believe that God has a plan for everything, right? So the jobs I had before this wouldn't have allowed me. I was a mom first, right? Like we talked about before, like
Mm-hmm.
being an ATP or in this industry or being a social anything you do. Hopefully, your family comes first, right? But we both have a job that we're passionate about. So when we're at work, we're like it almost doesn't feel like it. I don't know. I think that we're in a fulfilling line of work, and I think being an ATP or a CCC or I don't know. Every morning when I get up to work, I know what my why is, and I think I don't know if you can speak to that, but it's
That's
becoming an
awesome.
ATP. You can make good money, and
Yeah,
you do work that's meaningful.
yes. One of the things that I tell people all the time, I'll go into an eval and we may talk a while about the wheelchair, but then I end up talking more about the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people all the time, like, I do this for the people, really.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like I'll come in, like I kind of knew what you needed like 20 minutes ago. I was I was doing an eval yesterday, and there was and I finished up, and I went out through the football with the kids in the front yard that was at
Right.
the house. It's the
It's
people. It's
about
the people for me and having an impact. So um,
relationships.
is that relational part of just kind of what we do. And talking to a guy who might be a retired helicopter pilot or you know school teacher, whatever these people did. Somebody walked in here the other day and they're getting ready to travel all over Europe and they just needed my advice on kind of what to do. So I sat up there and talked with them 30 minutes about
Yeah.
traveling and
You know what? You should
what
send
to
her my
expect
way
and what to
too.
look for.
I've been to Europe a couple
Well, I
times.
do that often, right? Like, hey, you're getting ready to buy this. Do you think this is a good deal? But yeah, like it's really fulfilling. Um, and again, it doesn't necessarily feel like work, even though it's frustrating to deal with
Oh yeah.
funding. The it's kind of the ins and outs of what we do, but then that's a challenge also. So I kind of like that challenge as well. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like overcoming a challenge and then getting somebody access to that technology. Um, that's a great reward also. Um,
You've introduced me to some of your customers that like you're like, hey, you should meet Karen, like maybe similar situation or some experience I've already had because you're meeting lots of new wheelchair users in addition to people who've been in a chair for years, but people where this is like, they're having to wrap their brain around okay, I'm going to need a wheelchair for mobility and nobody's super happy about that. I mean, it's a tough place to be, but you've sent people to me where you thought I could help them and they helped me. Like some of them are like still my friends and some connections that I've made that it's part of the intangible benefits of this industry.
yeah, absolutely. Again, that to be able to have like an impact in a community, I mean, that's what we are here for. And you have that work going into it again, like you saying, making a good living. Yeah, all those things will come. I just try to keep the customer first.
Yep.
You know, I try to look at them that way. I spend more time laughing with customers, and I use your example all the time, like invisible wheelchair.
Yeah.
I kind of use that all the time.
You
Like,
tell
hey,
that story.
You know,
tell that story so people know.
So when and again, I'm not in a piece of equipment. I don't have a family member that's in equipment, but when you go into somebody and you're like, hey, you know, this is kind of where we are. One of my approaches is, hey, let's approach this as a rehab device and not necessarily as an end to a means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take on the perspective of this is no different than a knee brace or a neck brace or a wrist brace or a walker. It's
tool.
something to augment.
Yeah.
It's a tool, right? We don't hammer things with our fist. We use a hammer, right?
Right. Yeah.
To hammer a nail. We don't use our hand. It's a tool. So once we're able to kind of get around that corner, then you're asking people like, hey, you got to pick the color of this thing, right? And people, oh yeah, I want to go down the middle of the street with flashing lights and so forth.
Right.
So I'll never forget, like you told me this story about when they first approached you about, hey, you need to pick the color of your chair for becoming invisible. You know, because I'm not trying to like, oh, do you want light cast, lit casters?
Yeah, I was like,
and a flag.
Right. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. Wait, are you afraid I won't get enough attention as I roll into the room? You hot pink and flashing lights? No. Like, no. I was like,
right.
And at that point, so yesterday was International Wheelchair Day, and lots of people commented that at the very beginning, they hated their wheelchair. They hated it. It was like, can't you just see me? Aren't I still me? Right? It's a whole ego thing that you're like, oh my gosh, like now all they're going to see is this disability in this wheelchair, and they're not going to see me. And you reject it hard. And then for different people, it comes at different times. But then you're like, okay, look, this is my freedom, my mobility. It kind of becomes part of your body. Like, if you really like your wheelchair, like you're probably not going to want to give it up for the next one, but you end up loving it to a degree. Nobody wishes to be in one, but the relationship with the chair changes. But yeah, I was like, yeah. I was like, invisible is what I'd like. But I went as plain as possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
And look at you now. Your chair is like
I got tattoos and purple accents and yeah. No flashing lights though. Still not my style.
Yeah. So once we get around that corner, you're trying to earn somebody's trust within 45 minutes. To your boyfriend who's going into this, man, by no means what I call it easy.
Right.
Definitely rewarding, but definitely not easy. And
no, I mean, like people are upset sometimes, and you might be the recipient of some displaced anger.
You could be, but because you represent that disability.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Essentially, I'm an extension of trying to get you to overcome that disability. Whether it's a therapist, therapists get it, right? Therapists get it, doctors get it. Hey, doc, why you can't fix it? Why I can't walk?
Social workers get it. Social workers get it.
Social workers get it because we're an extension of
the hospital, the experience.
Right. Kind of what they're going through, right? We're kind of the extension of it. And you have to be supremely empathetic, and that's a muscle that you have to develop. It took me a while to not take it personally. If I brought somebody something, I hate it. Man, I would take that.
Yeah.
Man, like it used to beat me down because I know I did everything within my power to make sure that this was a good outcome. Trying not to leave any stone unturned. And then I started to learn that, man, you're not going, some people, it's just difficult. And
Yeah.
once you learn that, then it makes it easier. Then I just stop and just listen. And then a lot of times in the end up, they'll use that same piece of equipment, but it was just maybe the wrong time, maybe a bad day.
And I think you
Who
show me
knows?
happy stories too. So I think becoming an ATP, it has its difficulties, but then you counterbalance. One time I have this memory of you sending me a video of a kid playing basketball or something. Like,
Yeah,
then you get
yeah.
like the most amazing moments that make you cry tears of joy.
And that's more than the other. To be honest, it's just negativity kind of travels and kind of takes on a life of its own, kind of organically, but ultimately you have more impactful stories um,
Yeah.
to where you help. You focus on like just trying to get that one person at least happy with their technology, um, but for the
It,
most part, man, it
yeah.
is quite rewarding. A lady asked me yesterday, "How long have you been doing this?" Plus years. She's like, "You must really like it."
yeah.
Like you've been doing it
Right.
that long. I was like, "Yeah,
You're really good at it.
I like people, and
All right. So we
so it is
have,
really rewarding." So.
believe it or not, we've been talking for 36 minutes. Chris and I can talk for hours. I mean, hours. And I mean, and it's some wheelchair stuff and it's like life stuff. And I, I miss you. Like it's a kind of crazy how long it's been since I've actually been in a room with you. And so that we need to fix that. But
Yeah, it's funny how COVID kind of changed it. Like everybody's kind of dynamic. So now people aren't shy about staying away.
right. Well, we had a branch,
Nobody's making an extra effort to be.
right. We had that branch, like jambalaya thing, and I got COVID, of course. Like I was so excited I was going to see everybody in the office, and I got COVID that week. But anyway,
Yeah.
so parting advice. We just have a couple of minutes. If
Okay.
you if a person out there is listening to this and they want to become an ATP, what would be a first step? Like where do they start looking to get that experience? And then maybe recap some of the websites that they should go to.
Again, a great start would be resna.org, um, NORTS, NRRTS
Mm-hmm.
.org also is a great resource, and they're probably all interconnected. So once
Yeah.
you go to Resna, you see
I'll yeah.
NORTS, NORTS,
I'll
see
I'll
Resna.
put the websites on my show notes too.
Definitely somebody can reach out to me,
Yeah.
Christopher.Johnson at Numotion.com. I love, there's a young man that's in Mobile that was recently certified. I had an opportunity to mentor him for a few days.
Wow.
He let me know a few months ago that he actually passed his
Oh
exam.
my gosh.
But my advice would be one, you want to try to get with like a good organization, great
Like
organization,
Numotion.
Numotion, like Numotion, somebody reputable, right? Um, and then finding a great mentor would be great also,
Yeah.
because there's so much experience that you got to have to kind of move on. I come into this every day, and technology changes. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, we're in this initiative with new technology, ability drive,
Yeah.
ALS.
ALS.
I mean, and all we're doing is applying knowledge that we have, and then we bring that with us, and then we apply it forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but definitely that part. Once you get with the organization, again, what I tell our new CD techs and guys like that, hey, lean on your manufacturer's reps also.
Yeah.
Really experienced, go over equipment. And then once you get into that role as a new person, you got to be a great listener.
Yeah.
You got to be a great listener and supremely empathetic.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you have to
It's kind of
you have to grab onto that empathy.
yeah, and I almost think that those are qualities in a person that are the most difficult to teach. The technical side, I think a lot of people will catch on to it, but you have to be
That
there. You have
comes.
to be a customer service oriented kind of person to want to be in this business. So, which I mean, I think
I think if I had to pick one word, Karen, if I pick one word, it would be empathy. You have to, and not sympathy. Not
empathy.
saying going. I know Karen Roy don't want anybody feeling sorry for her. I know that, right?
That'd be
When
foolish.
I mean empathy, empathy. You have to essentially see things from their perspective. And want you to do that and listen.
Right.
Listen.
Yeah.
Listen. My question now when I go into a room now is how can I help?
Yeah.
It's that's kind of where I am now. Like what? Tell me why we're here. And I try to let them dictate.
It's also the key to, like you said
saying,
earlier.
Oh, instead of saying like, oh, you're a T12, whatever. Hey, you need this, and nope.
Right.
How can I help?
Yeah, that's the key to a positive outcome is making sure that it's customer centered and that you're making them the center of the conversation.
Gotta be.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get them to be transparent within a 45 minutes to maybe an hour and a half assessment period. And again, look at Numotion, we have parameters and metrics and things that we need to work within to have good transactions. But at the same time, if you need to break that down into multiple visits, break it down into multiple visits. And then, hey, we want to meet today, but your needs are kind of taking on a different deal. Hey, let me meet you at work, and then I'll meet you at your house, and then we'll come back to therapy. Those kind of things are, I think, super important.
Yeah, very important. And then if anybody else is, if you're interested too, once you become an employee of Numotion, we have an ATP development program. And I can also put some information there about that because we'll actually help get you the training. We have educational modules, and a whole department of people that are going to try to help you study for that exam and meet your career goals.
Yeah, that is absolutely awesome that they have that program now. And I would challenge anybody, even within Numotion, I would challenge anybody within Numotion, if you're wanting to take that next step, hey, let your VSO know, let your immediate supervisor know, like, hey, I think I wanna pursue.
Do this, yeah. I don't know another company.
ATP certification.
Not to to blow smoke, but I mean, Numotion. It's how we stay in business too, right? We have to have the next generation of ATPs, and we're training that next generation, and I think Numotion does a really good job of helping people move up.
One of the things is I say this all the time. There is no precedent. We have growing pains at our branch, but there's no precedent for what Numotion is doing and what we're doing. Who do we look to say, oh, this is how they did it? No,
we're industry leaders.
We're the leaders we're the industry leaders in the world. So there's no precedent for that. So we have to be mobile and agile and, be ready to learn and be
growing
ready
pains
to unlearn and be ready to.
Good thing. Remember when I was a territory manager?
My son's knees are aching right now. I say, son, that's what it takes to be 6'2", 6'3", man. You just gotta live with it,
Suck
man.
It up. Yeah. I will. Hopefully, I'll be able to hug your neck soon in person, and then I'll see you on the next podcast.
Hey, peace
Thank
out.
you, Chris. All right, bye.
Hey, Numotion. Let's go.
Right.
Good job.
All right.